Good morning. Good Yom Tov. Freilich and Lag B'Omer. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are at the bottom of page 1318. Aleph Shin Yud Ches. So after yesterday, I gave a overview of, in general, what it means, Gevurah, Chesed, especially the centrality that he said that is the klola, the Araisa. Tchola teira nivnal yesei zeh, shulahamti kadin. That is to sweeten the severities. That's the whole, that is, the entire Torah is built on that foundation. So we spoke about two ways of how you sweeten the severities. One, the next paragraph, nimtza, he concluded and said from this, the takeaway, so-called, the conclusion, nimtza, that there are two ways of sweetening. The first way is amtakas agvuras ayidei riba achsadim, that there's an abundance of chesed that overpowers and nullifies and weakens the gevurah. And he gave the example. He gave hamshachas mad, hamshach of mad, which is hamshacha from above. That mamtik that sweetens the rotze, the yearning, and the longing, and the fiery burning desire of malchus is basmas nukva lalos man. However, because it's coming so-called from above, and it's not transforming the lower level, so it's only lefishal levad. Like we talk about earth, you water the ground, it's not a permanent thing. The ground then gets parched again and needs to be watered again. And the contrary, it becomes even more thirsty, like he said in davening. Rotze leads to a shuv, and shuv leads to a rotze. Shuv leads to a rotze. Like he said, rotze leads to the shuv, shuv mevias rotze. And when you taste from it, then it creates even a deeper desire for more. And the same thing is tevera, that the ra is mizbatel mipnei hatev, that the overpowering goodness of the divine soul within that is nullifies the ra of the nefesh habamis, it weakens its power to the point that it also comes to a state of love. But all this is chlishus va'bitul the nefesh habamis. It's the weakening, the subduing, and the nullification or neutralization of the animal soul. Loishem is battled by etzem mahuseh. Not that it became nullified fundamentally. Its very personality and existence did not fundamentally change. Like he used earlier the expression, does the ispashtus, extension of it. And that's where we stopped the first. So this is like, though he already explained the two types of sweetening, but the Rebbe Rashab is coming back and summing it up and adding more details as we explained, as he develops this further. And now we're going to go over Habeis. So we're talking now 9 lines from the bottom of page 1318, and the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. We'll start with Habeis. The line Loishem is battled betzem mahuseh. Habeis is referring to the second mini hamta, the second method or the second manner through which you sweeten the severities. And this is a deeper this is already transforming the gvuras themselves. So he says like this: Hu shagvuras nefachim be'etzem v'nasim chsadim. It's not like this sweet waters that are more than the bitter waters. That here the gvuras themselves are transformed be'etzem. They're fundamentally transformed. V'nasim chsadim, and they become chsadim, not just dominated by chesed, not just nullified, overpowered, but they become chsadim. Ukamai, and he's bringing now he's bringing psukim. Before he didn't bring all these psukim. Ha'hevchi hatsur agam mayim. The one who transforms the tsur, agam, which is the stone of a stony. There's a word for it. Not lekt. Agam is like a vessel.
You change the rock to become for a lake of water.
But what does agam mean?
Agam is a lake.
A lake?
Yeah, a lake of water.
Oh, a lake of water. Okay, right. Agam. Okay, I thought agam was the container. Okay, so ha'hevchet sur agam mayim. He transformed the stone to water. This is a transformation. Shatsur, the sur, which is the stone. Sur b'chinas gvuras. Stone is the level of gvuras. It's intense. It's a stone. Nafachim be'etzem v'nasim chsadim. They fundamentally change and become chsadim, the chsadim of water. Now, it's interesting. The water came from the stone, but the expression of the pasuk is a hevchei atzur, that there was a transformation of the stone, which a stone usually does not give water. A stone doesn't have water to give. But the stone now became an actual bearer of water. So it's not just that the water was flowing through it, that the stone, which was on one hand, like before Gevurah, has now become a source of water. But more than that, it became actual water, which is interesting. It's not the stone became water or the stone was a source of water. But you have to say, since the water is coming from the stone, then the stone itself is a source of water. It's like water within it. Okay. And now he brings what we mentioned yesterday, but he didn't mention, but we didn't read it inside. We talked about the Levim and the Kahanim. So we know Kahanim are Chesed, Ish Chesed. Levim is Gevurah. So it says, Levim Yiyu Kahanim. So it says in Yecheskel, so it says that what? That the Kahanim Halavim B'nei Tzaddik. The Kahanim, the Levim that are today Levim, will be Kahanim. Levim is Gevurah, Kahanim is Chesed. Like the Kisra Arizal that writes on this topic, and that the Alter Rebbe brings it in Tanya. In Perek Nun, which Perek is it? The late Mems or Nun Aleph. In those Prakim, he brings this point. So you see, not the way it is today. Today, the Tenufas Alavim de Kohanim. Today, the Kohanim are the ones that lead the way. And the Tenufas Alavim, the amount that they receive, that is waved to them, is through Kohanim. The Kohanim are the ones that are mashpiyah to Levim. So today it's lichlala smala, the left side of the gvuras of the Levim are encompassed biyamina, like he said earlier, lichlala smala biyamina, in the yamin of the Kohanim. Bizgabras achsadim ala gvuras. That you have the dominance of the chsadim of the Kohanim over the gvuras of the Levim. To the point that the gvuras are secondary and subjugated or betalim or nullified or betalim or they're subjugated to the chsadim. Levi comes from the word vayalavu alecha, that they are serving. They will support and they will serve you. That's what the Levim are about. They're like assistants, servicing the Kohanim. Tofel Levad meaning secondary. They're not the Ikar, like it says elsewhere. Avala Osid. But in the future, there's going to be a change. You are Levim Kohanim. The Levim will be Kohanim. Hainu v'hainu, which means what? Lo yirak sheyut felim el achsadim. They won't merely be secondary to the chsadim of the Kohanim. Elahein atzman, they themselves, the Levim, yibchinis achsadim to Kohanim. They themselves would be like the mashpiyim, the chsadim of Kohanim. So there you have again a distinction between the two methods. Today, it's in a way where it's the chsadim is the ikr, and the Levim are tofel to that. And la'asid the Levim themselves will become Kohanim. The question is, what will be with the Kohanim? It's another discussion whether the Kohanim will be Levim or they'll be on a higher level. There's different discussion on that. And now, just like he said before, the Eifana Aleph, how does this apply to good and evil, to right and wrong? So he says, Kain, like he said before, B'tevara. So the first Eifan Tevara, the Ra is only nullified by the good. Same thing with Tevara, V'hu, Shara Nepach L'tev. That the negative, the evil will be transformed to goodness. Like it says, Vayafech. I'm not sure why they're correcting. Oh, because it doesn't say Kamosha Kosev. Below they write, like it says, Vayapech. What does it say by Bilam? Vayapech Hashem Lekim L'cha HaKlolo L'bracha. That Hashem, Vayapech is transformation. Transforms a curse, L'bracha, to a blessing. Shaklola Asba Nefcha L'bracha. That the curse itself, not that the curse is diminished or weakened or eliminated or nullified, but the curse becomes blessing. It's a very different story. You could say somebody, God forbid, curses, and God or some other, or a tzaddik, is able to be mavatal the curse. He eliminates it, or he nullifies it. But he's saying here the transformation that the curse itself becomes blessing. And the Rebbe Rashab continues, Ukamoy ba'amtokas, next page, 1319. Ukamoy ba'amtokas ha-gvurah is b'yem ha-kippurim. Like the sweetening of Gevurah on Yom Kippur, so Yom Kippur, we know, is a high level of transformation. Shenafochim the Chesed, that the Gevurah of Yom Kippur gets transformed to kindness, to Chesed. Ukamoy neisei oven. Neisei oven, as we'll learn in a moment, is more than kavish oven. Neisei oven means that he carries the oven, that it transforms it. Ukiyadua hefresh, as it's known the difference between kavish oven and neisei oven. So sometimes the expression is kavish oven means that he conquers, he subdues, he dominates over. Kavish is from the word conquering, the sin. And what's the difference between that and neisei oven? So he says, the kavish oven who she'ena nechshav, avol einam is bat legami. Kavish oven means he conquers it, he overwhelms it, overrides it. Means it's not considered. It's not ein nechshav. He's not considering, even though there was a sin. Kavish oven means he overlooks it. It's not. He's not giving it any credence or value. But it's einam is bat legamri. But you can't say that it was eliminated. It was not eliminated entirely. Ukadisa b'yalkut al pasuk kvosim bnei shana, like it says in Medrash in Yalkut, kvosim bnei shana. Kvosim are the 1-year-old lambs. B'shamei emrim kvosim shen kefshim aveneseim shel Yisrael. So with the types of kvosim, even though it's an animal, it also comes from the word kevish. They kefshim, they conquer, and they basically override the sins of Yisrael. K'moy da'amrinon, k'moy da'amr ha'kosev, or k'moy da'amra. Yachbesh avenesenu, that you should conquer our sins. That is kevish. Ubeis hil emrim kol dover shu nechbash sefi lotzuf. Hillel says everything that's nichbash, anything that is sublimated or nichbash means conquered, sefi lotzuf ultimately is going to rise again. It will rise to the surface. El kvosim shemachapsim avenesem shal Yisrael. Kvosim, however, is deeper. They mechapsim, they cleanse the sins of Israel. So kevish literally means you conquer something, doesn't mean you eliminated it. You just conquered it. You're like controlling it. It's like controlling the enemy. It's subdued, but the enemy has not been changed. When you say mechapsim means like when you say kibbutz is like laundry. When you cleanse something. So that's cleansing the Avanaseh. So Beis Hillel was saying something more than Beis Shammai in the Taich. Gemara Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Zayin. So they brings from Rosh Hashanah Yud Zayin. I think Rabbi Lazar Eimer, Kevshe, Rabbi Yehuda ben Chananya Eimer Neisei. So there the Gemara talks about two opinions on how the sins are affected. So I think it's Rabbi Lazar says kevshe, the word kevish, it's conquered. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Chananya says neisei, it's contained, it's carried. Upirish Rashi, kevish, hakaf shel zachias. So kaf is like when you have a scale, and on one side of the zachias, the merits, and the other side are the avenis, the sins. So when you say kevish, hakaf shel zachias, that what dominates What outweighs what? The scales are tipped toward the merits. And through that, you machriya, it's that the kafs of Zochi is dominate and conquer, and through that, you machriya, you come to the conclusion that the merits outweigh the sins. His gabrus achsodim. That's his gabrus achsodim. The chesed dominates over gvurah. So that's kavish. Neisah, like he said, is the deeper level of transformation. Now he brings another Gemara, be'erchin. He spells it irchin. It's usually without the first yud. But he says be'erchin, daf ches Ayin Beis. So we have here a few things. The Yalkut he brought the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, and now the Gemara in Erchin. Page 8b, Pirush Rashi Kavish. Rashi explains what is Kavish. Shemastir umatmin ha'avenis. It conceals and hides the sins. It's like covering them up. So let's say you have on the table, you have some dirt. So you, instead of really cleaning the dirt, you cover it up. So it's not recognized. No one's perceiving it. So it says, Master umatmin ha'avenis tachas kisei ha'koved. That the sins, when you say kavish, is that it's concealing and hiding the sins under the throne of glory, meaning the kisei hakavod of the Eibishter. That's what means kavish avanesenu. When we say kavish, what he said before, yachbush avanesenu. Okay. Umakol mokim, but when you conceal or cover and conceal and cover, umakol mokim ha'oven atzme ein nimchak. And nevertheless, the sin itself was not erased. And now comes the higher level. V'neisei oven, not kavish, hu sha'oven nimchak, that the sin gets erased, umay v'reisei legamri. And he completely removes it. It's not hidden, not concealed, not overlooked, not overpowered. It gets erased and completely removed. Like this is explained elsewhere. This will explain in L'Kutei Torah and a few other places. And this is the second A from the sweetening that we discussed earlier. That the Gevurah, in its fundamental, its very personality, was transformed to Chesed. It wasn't overridden or overwhelmed or overpowered, but it itself was Nepach, was transformed to Chesed. But as we're going to learn, this still comes from Chesed, because both ways are the catalyst is Chesed, just two ways that Chesed impacts the Gevurahs. So now he's concluded now the second Eifen, and he's going to continue the discussion. It's not over. Like I said, he doesn't get to the third. He doesn't get to the third Eifen till page 1325. So meanwhile, we're talking these main two ways of how Chesed affects and sweetens the severities of Gevurah. Any questions? Okay.
I'm not sure I understand the metaphor using the word nosa, which is to carry the sin, that you sort of transform it that way. I mean, I know it's just a word, but I don't understand the connection between the word carrying a sin and transforming it.
That's what the meaning is. When you say carrying, that God carries it, means he is transforming it. That's simply how they're explaining that word, what it means.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would suggest looking inside the sources. They probably explain it more detail, but that's the common interpretation. Kavish means you conquer, you like so-called dominate over it or subjugate it, and Neisah is a higher level where it's called. That's simply how it's explained.
I'll check the source. Maybe it explains it better. You carry something, it doesn't mean it gets turned into something else.
We're not talking here. This is not digduk of carrying. You're not carrying it like into carrying a package. Neisah means that God contains it, that he carries, that he elevates it.
I know it's not literal, but still, I'll look it up. Maybe I can find something and post it to the thread.
Any other questions? So let's continue. The next paragraph on page 1319. Vihine, and now, Beizefani, I'm talking now, these two manners, or these two methods of sweetening, Hakolu am tokas Gevurah shalidei chesed. They're all the sweetening, am tokas Gevurah, the sweetening of the severity through chesed, like he's explicitly stated on page 1318, because that's how it works. It's chesed that causes this sweetening. The only difference is how it sweetens it. The two ways here, but they're both coming from chesed. Shekenu gam ba'efen hamtoka beis. The first way, for sure, because chesed is overriding the abundance of the sweet waters, is neutralizing or diluting the bitter. But he says Shekenu gam ba'efen hamtoka beis. This is so too that chesed is the one that's causing also the second manner of sweetening. Chesed mamtik Gevurah. That this is done, this achievement that you're transforming the Gevurah to Chesed is not coming from the Gevurah itself. Chesed is affecting to that extent that it transforms. You bring in this the statement he made before, transforming the stone to a river, to a pool of water, to a lake of water. A pool is agam a pool or a lake? Could be both. That's what I was thinking. A pool. Yeah. Shazel mashagvura be'etzem nepach lechesed canal. This is referring that Gevurah itself is transformed to chesed. Harizem etzadeh gilim el maila. How is this happening? It didn't happen on its own. It's because there's a gilim el maila that's causing the Gevurah to be transformed. Komishkosav lifnei odin cheli aretz. So chele is referring to like the what do they call the foundations? The chele is the adonim, the fasteners. One second. Let me read inside the explanation. I'll get back to it. For who b'chinas yisei zah. This is referring to the foundation. You say zah. What?
Chuli means shake. Be afraid. Milifnei odin chuli yoretz. You should be tzutreisel.
So before the master of God, the master of the universe, God, Odin, is chuli yoretz. The earth trembles.
Yes.
Okay, I thought chuli. Okay, let's see how we explain. V'b'chinas yisei zah. This is referring in Kabbalah to the level of Yesod Zah, the Ikre B'chinas Chsadim Keneda. Okay, let's read on because I'm not sure the meaning of this, but let me just read inside and let's see if we can figure it out. So this is Yesod Zah, which is primarily Chsadim. But where is the trembling of the earth, Miflei Oden? How does that fit here? We're talking here about that the Gevurah is, in other words, it's not coming from itself, it's because it's trembling in the presence of something greater than itself. That's most likely what he's saying. So when God's presence, like he said before, that the Kateger, the prosecutor becomes the defense when there's the Gili of Pnei Hashem. So when there's a higher gili, so therefore it causes, I guess that's what he's saying, that the ikar is chsadim, that is causing the Gevurah to transform to chesed. But I'm not saying where chele oretz is transformation. Let me read on. Ubezer Pashas Yisrei, Isa, in Zohar chapter Yisrei, it says, Milifnei Odin da ima. That Odin is the level of ima, bina. Milifnei Elikim, Yaakov, da Abba. When it says, Elikim, Eliki.
Lifnei Odin chuli yoretz, milifnei Eloka Yaakov.
Okay. So the Milifnei Elika is Abba, da Abba, is Chochmah. So let's see how he's going to explain this. And elsewhere it explains like this. That it's like Odin Haniflois, which is the master Haniflois, that is of wonders, or the master that's of wonders, the level of Keser. The Yedua, I'm going to read the whole piece and then we'll explain it. So let's bear with me. Shekoy ala Odin, that this is referring to the level of the ark in the Mesa Mikdash. Ukameshikosh of Odin Abris, Adin Kola Oretz. The Odin Habris, the Ark of the Covenant, was the Odin Kol Oretz, is like the master of the entire world. The Odin Esis Neira, the word Odin is the same letters as Neira, which is awesome, or even fear invoking. Bechinis Neira Tehilis, the level of Neira Tehilis. How awesome are your praises? So what is this? So let's see how he connects it. So what do we take from this? That when the stone is transformed to water, that transformation that takes Gevurah of the stone and transforms it to the Chesed to water, that comes from the Chesadim Elyenim, from the level of Kesed. One second. What is this pasuk referring to, Rab Shleima? When it says Melifnei Odin Chulei Haaretz, what trembling? What's he referring to? Why is the pasuk saying that? Is it connected to the stone turning to water?
Yeah, because right away after that it said, right after.
Where is this?
It's Tehillim 114.
Tehillim 114?
Yeah.
It says it's
we say it in Hallel, of course. So read again. Can you read the whole? Do you have in front? Can you read the whole two psukim? How it goes?
Milifnei Yodin Chuli Oretz, Milifnei Elokai Yaakov, Hoi Sur Agam Moim, Halom Ishlemaynu Moim.
Okay, now I got it. So that's what he's explaining. Since you're talking about the transformation of the tzur, so it originates from the power. What causes the tzur, the stone, to try to transform to water? The pasuk before says, because you have the gili of Odin, of gili mifnei Odin, which is the level of Yisei Zah, which is be'ikar chesed. And Zoyar, he says, is the level of Bina. Mifnei Elikim is the level of Abba. And someone else says, Adin Nafles, all the way to Kesed. So what's causing the Gevurah of the stone to transform to water? It's not because it's coming from itself. It's the Chsadim of Kesed that ultimately have that impact. Okay, there we go. So that's the level of the Odin, which is Neira Tehilis. So that's all this level of Kesed. That causes the stone to turn to water.
Is this the trembling?
That makes sense. One second. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah. Is this the trembling of the earth where you said, in other words, how did the Gevurah? You said the Gevurah is like the Aretz, and that's like Ratzo. I think that was today or yesterday, and so the earth is trembling because it's seeking, let's say.
Yeah, but that's not what he's explaining here. Here he's explaining it more. He's not bringing that here. He brought that yesterday regarding Rotzer.
I know. I'm trying to connect it though. If the earth trembles,
I don't know if it's connected necessarily.
A revelation from above, and the Chassidim is coming from above. The water's coming down to quench the earth, and it's.
I don't know if you need to connect it. I don't know if it needs to be connected. Maybe not. But one thing for sure, he's coming to explain how the stone turns into water. That's what he's coming to explain. That is coming from the Melifnei Odin Chele Aretz. I don't know if it's connected to what he said yesterday, to that piece. Maybe, may not sure. There he was talking more the thirst, like the earth is thirsty and it's quenched by the mad, amshachas mad. That's what he said. Maybe yes, maybe not. I'm not sure. Okay. The Moshe.
It sounds now so powerful. Malacho hayom kisonus hayarden tisev leocher milifnei odo in chule yoretz milifnei Elokai Yaakov hahoifche yatzu agam moim.
Yeah, the order makes, the sequence makes a lot of sense now. Yeah. He's literally talking about.
It says it's all Mitzrayim. Hayom rov hayonois hayarden tisev leocher malacho hayom kisonus milifnei odo in chule yoretz milifnei Elokai Yaakov hahoifche yatzu agam moim. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue. Ukamoy ba'akos atzur, the Moshe, like when we see when Moshe struck the stone, he struck the stone, the ksiva hakisa batzur, and you struck the stone in the stone. Oi, the second approach was with debartum el asela. That you should speak to the stone. So we know the first time Moshe struck it, then later when he said to speak, the Eibusha said speak to it, and Moshe went ahead and struck it. So he's saying like this, V'amar Azal, Shana lo Perek Echad. That this has happened twice in the Torah. The first time, the Eibusha told him to strike the stone, which he did. The second time in Parsha Chukas, the Eibusha told him to speak to the stone. Instead, when Moshe saw nothing's coming, the water is not coming, he struck the stone. I think what he's saying is, Amar Azal, Shana Lepiraka, that Moshe thought, maybe misheard what the Eibusha said, that he has to strike again. But the truth is, the Eibusha changed, told him to speak, not to strike the stone. Had the Eibusha not said that, and the Eibusha not told him, speak to the stone, so the only way to draw water from the stone would have been through striking it, like it was the first time. No, I correct myself. I'm sorry. He's speaking now that there's two ways to bring the water out of the stone. One is through striking, one is through speaking. So Lule Zeis, I'm not sure what he's saying, that without that, the water would have only come with striking or through Dibur de Teira, or through the words of Teira. I'm not clear what he's saying here, to be very honest. I have to look up the Razal, what the Razal says here. Does anybody understand this piece about the striking of the stone and the speaking? What is he saying here? Looks like it's okay. So he just said that, one second, the stone transformed to water, that came through a higher power. So I'm assuming what he wants to say is that the only way to get water out of the stone is not because the stone can turn to water. You need a higher power. That's like striking the stone or speaking to it. In other words, you need something that will draw the water out of the stone. It's not that, like he said, it's all trying to establish that it's coming through chsadim. Even the transformation, even the second sweetening, the second way of sweetening also comes through a force that's higher, what he called chsadim. So he's saying, I think that's what he's saying, that the only way to get water out of the stone is through striking it or through speaking to it. It wouldn't come on its own. That's what I think he's saying. You need him to strike it. You need him to speak. Not sure what the Razal comes to say. Lule what?
Does it come from Kesser? which is Malchus, Keser Malchus, and the Makshaba Dibur Maisa, and it's going backwards up the chain, and eventually maybe it would have been Makshaba.
What is that connected to what we're talking about? No. Anyway, what he's definitely saying here is that you need either to strike it or to speak to it. What is the Shana Allah of Perek Echad? Does Rashi bring that in Chukas? Okay, I'm going to do a little research more on this, but bottom line is what he's saying here is that you see that in order for the stone to transform to water, you need a higher power. In the pasuk is Milifnei Adin Chule Haaretz, and now he's talking about Moshe striking or speaking to the stone. So we see now he's going to continue to make the case that even the second form of transforming the Gevurah to Chesed also comes through Chesed, not through Gevurah itself. The Chain, I'll come back to the Amar Azal. I'll have to look up what it says, but I think that's what he's saying here. Yeah. The Chain v'yapech Hashem elekecha l'chos haklol lebracha. He's going back to the verses he cited earlier, the bottom of last page. The transformation of curse to blessing. Zewai dehachsodim, the Shem Havaya dafke. It doesn't happen on its own. This is also v'yapech Hashem elekecha. You need the chsodim of Havaya to cause the transformation of klola, of the curse to blessing. V'yadua, as it's known. The Havaya zeh hu Shem Havaya shebe'elein sof atzmus hamaitzil. This Havaya that does this transformation is the Shem Havaya in the infinite divine light in the core of the emanator, which most likely is the Eir Lifnei Tzimtzum, Atzmus HaMaitzil, or the levels higher than Atzilus. The B'chdei Sha'agvuras, Sha'agvura Tisapech, the Etzem Mehusa, in order for the Gevurah to fundamentally change its personality, that comes from a transmission from the core of the infinite light. So what he's established now till now is to say that even the second way of sweetening, which transforms, is also coming from Chesed. Chesed is the catalyst that causes it to be a power that's higher than the Gevurah itself. The first Eifin, however, it's only sublimating, it's nullifying, it's neutralizing, weakening, dominating, all the different expressions he used. And now it's transforming. That's what he explained right now. As I said, I have to get back to you about exactly, but it's all coming from an outside force that causes the stone to give water, that the curse become blessing, and that comes from Havaya, the higher level, Atzmus. Okay, Havaya, Atzmus Hamaitz. Any questions before I continue reading?
For what it's worth, when it's talking with the Arazal, it looks the Shana Alav Perek Aleph. It looks like it's the Yalkut. If that's a source you want to look at, that's the only place in Safaria where it comes up in connection with
I'll look
this
it up.
opinion.
I'll look it up. I'll look it up. So I'll continue. V'zeu ha'hefresh. I'm talking now, and this is the difference between the two methods or the two manners of sweetening. The first sweetening, the first manner of sweetening, hu kasher achsodim hen be'erech echad im hagvura. In the first approach, the chsodim are be'erech. They're in the same realm, and they're commensurate and proportionate to the Gevurah. And they manifest and get mixed into the Gevurah. Like when you mix the sweet waters or the healthy good waters with the bad waters, they're both water, they're both in the same category. It's just they're different types of water, but not one is higher than the other. And they're mixed together one with the other. However, the good waters are beribui, are in abundance, Valkanim is Gabrim, and that's why they dominate. That's why they overpower the bad waters. But they are both in the same field. As a matter of fact, if you had more bad water than good water, that would dominate. So they're both equal in stature. Meaning stature here, not the stature of holiness, but stature in power. Same thing with Chesed and Gevurah. The Shneim hem b'chinas Amidus. When you talk about Chesed and Gevurah of Zah, of Atzilus, so both Amidus, Chesed and Gevurah. So Chesed could dominate over Gevurah, but they're not in different worlds. You're not talking about Chesed of Arich Ampin or Atzmus HaMaitzil or a higher state. You're talking about a Chesed that's commensurate to the Gevurah, and who overpowers whom? The Chesed is overpowering the Gevurah. They're both in the world of midas, of attributes, of emotions, of faculties. The ima yez the b'chinas Chesed u bli gvul. And even though we know that Chesed is bli gvul, because Chesed is a flow, an infinite flow adayin, bli gvul adayin. V'gvurah b'chinas hagbala, and Gevurah is the limitation and restraint. So it's a state of hagbala, limit. U'kidu bein hagadol hagibur, as we speak about hagadol hagibur, about the Eibush, hagadol refers to God's infinite flow. Hagibur is God's infinite power of restraint and limit. B'kol mokim, harigama chesed u'b'chinas gvul. Nevertheless, chesed in this category is still gvul. It's still a defined entity. Sharihu b'chinas midah, because the state of a midah, midah means both an emotion, but midah also means a measure. The measure of chesed happens to be, it flows bli gvul, but it's not in a completely different league. It's still the gather of midah, which is hagbala, state of confined state, a defined state. Ukiyadua, as it's known, the chesed ugamkein lashpia laharoi dafke. The chesed, the role of chesed is to be mashpia, to transmit, specifically someone who's worthy. It doesn't just transmit to everybody indiscriminately. U'kumoshn is bar liel, as we learned earlier about chesed. Now comes, I see, not a short, again, a parenthesis. In the parentheses, he's going to reconcile, how do you explain that it's both bli gvul and gvul? I'm just thinking whether we should skip the parentheses. Just 1 second. I just want to see where this goes, how far. Okay. So this is going to continue for a while now. I thought he's going to conclude quickly. No. This is now going to continue for 1, 2, almost 2.5 pages, where he's going to explain the difference between the first Hamtak and the second. So I think, let me first explain it orally, and then we'll learn it inside. So till now, we've learned about these two types of sweetening. We said one is overpowers, nullifies, but doesn't transform its etzem uchus, the very personality. The second one, it transforms. Both are coming through chesed. He also added that when it comes to the second one, you have to have a power that's higher than Gevurah. This is the highest levels of Chassadim coming from high levels that cause the transformation. Based on that, he's going to explain what's the difference between these two forms of sweetening. He's going to explain the first one, even though it comes from a higher power of Chesed over Gevurah, but it's still commensurate to each other. That's why you can't transform. You can't transform something that you are identified with. It's like saying you can't solve a problem from the system where the problem was created. So though Chesed does have the power and is going to draw from higher strengths to sweeten the Gevurah, but it's not going to have the power to transform it unless you go to a completely higher level from Atzmus HaMaitzil, like he says. So he's going to explain that these two ways of sweetening comes from two different levels of Chesed. One is going to be a Chesed that's higher than shtalshelus, but it comes through chesed that relates to the Gevurah, so it has the power to nullify it. And the second is going to come from a higher power that has also the power to transform the stone into water. That's briefly what he's going to say. But just to give you again the lay of the land, this begins here, V'zehu hefresh. He goes all the way to page 1321. The end of the paragraph is still the first eifin where Chesed and Gevurah are commensurate to each other. Omnam hamtoka Beis. Then he's going to say the second way of sweetening, where it transforms its very personality, that's going to come from a far higher level of Chesed that has the power to transform. It's interesting. I always used to think about this in context of the Beinoni and the Tzaddik. I remember when I was many years ago, I asked myself the question, if at the end of the day in Tanya he says that the Beinoni has control over his thought, speech, and action. So if you look at the Beinoni and external, if you just look at the Beinoni, you won't be able to distinguish between him and a Tzaddik because you don't know what struggle is going on within him. His thought, speech, and action is completely pure, like a Tzaddik's. The difference is that he still has a battle. His animal soul is very active, but he keeps it at bay. He subdues it. He controls it. The tzaddik, on the other hand, has won the battle, whatever level. But bottom line, what? So I always wondered: is there a difference that we could see? Could you really see the difference between a tzaddik and a beinoni? Where would be a nafkamina? Some difference between them. And the thought I had, which I think now is very consistent to what we're going to learn here, is the difference would be that a Beinoni, because he's fighting his own battle, he can't go ahead and make another person a Beinoni because he's dealing with his own struggle. The animal soul is very much part of his life. He just has the power to control it. A tzaddik who's won over the battle has the power to help someone else win their battle as well. So a tzaddik could make somebody a Beinoni can't make another Beinoni. I've never seen it written anywhere, but essentially it's based on the principle that when you yourself are in the battle, you can't really be a coach or a power that's outside of it to help transform it. You have the ability to control, you have the ability to help somebody else. But if you want real transformation, you have to have someone that comes from a system, from a reality that's outside of the system where there's the battle, and that's where transformation can happen. Just a thought I wanted to mention. But he's going to be speaking about this more at length. So I think right now, I'm going to stop here, right before the parentheses, because I wanted to first just establish these two different ways of how the Gevurah is ultimately affected. And we're going to learn it inside, starting tomorrow. I mean, it was already started, but continuing tomorrow. So I'm stopping by Commissioner's Bar Le'il, where he's saying that even though Chesed is bli gvul, and Gevurah is gvul, but Chesed is still gvul, it's still a midah, it's still a measured entity, it's still one of the middas. So Chesed and Gevurah are commensurate to one another, and therefore, it only can dominate over it, it can't transform it. That's what he's leading to. But we'll read it all inside. I'm going to stop here before the parentheses. Any questions? Okay. So we'll stop the recording here.